can't help us. It's not sustainable because the majority of people that use the mobile money
We should
are the
all ask
poor.
ourselves, what is the government doing with our taxes? What we could see in traffic is V8 and sirens paving the way for the MPs to go. But what is the money going? So when you're introducing a new tax, how are you managing to account for it? Okay, how do we know that that money is being used wisely? So it's a matter of trust and being consistent with the ideology. And this is not only for Ghana, it's for all Africa. We need to find a way to gain the trust of the population.
We are saying that this levy is going to bring over $1 billion. However, we have a tax component, the benchmark index. If we should introduce it right now, it's going to bring over $1 billion.
Taxes, where the normal Ghanaian who doesn't know I have to do a tax return will end up never going for a tax return. So get the money and technically use it on other things, which is already taxed. VAT, the 17%.
Okay, the e-Levy is, the bill actually proposes a levy on mobile money transfer as well as bank transfers. And the bill proposes to apply a rate of 1.75%. So anytime you transferring money from your mobile money account to another mobile money account, or you are making payments to anybody through your QR code, or you slot your card into a point of sale device in a shop or anywhere else to pay them for a service. Once that payment is effected, an amount of a percentage of 1.75 will be applied. That is 0.0175 times the amount of money you are transferring, and that will be applied. It also applies to transfers that you make in the bank, from a bank account to a mobile money account, or from one bank account to another bank account. So the levy is applied to these, so that once that is, you are making those transfers, you are exposed to the levy. Indeed, the goal, according to the the memorandum that accompanied the bill, is that they would want to generate money to support debt repayment. We all know that the government is saddled with debt, the largest in the history of the country. And they also have a youth entrepreneurship program that they want to fund. And of course, in the bill, it is also stated that they want to support the digital infrastructure and also other flagship programs. And that which comes to mind quickly is the free school program. So these are the goals that for which the bill, the memorandum stated, and then that is what the bill seeks to do. That is in a nutshell. Let me quickly add that there are some exemptions to the levy. So for example, if you involves up to 100 cedis cumulative, you will not pay any levy on it, which means that once you are transferring 101 in any day, then the levy applies, and that levy will be on the 101 and not on the 101 minus 100, which is the 1 cedi. Of course, if you are transferring between accounts, and if those are your personal accounts, then you don't also pay the levy. And in case you are making payments for taxes or any charges that you are paying online on the .gov payment platform, you also don't attract that. And where there is a payment that is transfer of money from a principal to its agent, or from the agent to its principal, in that case too, you also do not pay. So those are some of the exemptions that have been stated in the law. Sorry, in the bill, because it's not a pass,
yes.
so it is not a law.
Exactly.
In the
It's a
bill.
bill.
Yeah, in the bill.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. So, something like staff salaries, assuming somebody's paying salaries with mobile money, it will be impacted, right?
I expect it should not be impacted. I am interpreting. Yes, I am interpreting that to mean I am paying my worker and I send money to his account. I am his principal and he is my agent. I expect that should not happen. I'm cautious because it was not clearly stated, but if I interpret it within the framework of principal-agent relationship, then I expect that once you are paid salary, it should not. However, if you are transferring that salary, part of it to somebody, your mother or whoever, once you are making the transfer, the amount of money would apply.
Awesome. Thank you.
I must say it's not valid. And why do I say so? During COVID, yes, the economy may have suffered some downturns because we had blocked activity. There were I call it shutdown or lockdowns, and then activity was low. And because of that, people may not have moved on. But once the people have been permitted to move around, I think that it's not so much an issue. Moreover, the benefits that were granted, for example, giving people water, giving people electricity for free. Immediately in 2021, a COVID tax was introduced, 1%. And that was explained to cover the costs that were incurred on those goodies that we were provided with. And of course, during that time, the World Bank gave us about $400 million US. That is going to cushion us. And so it meant that for the COVID, during the COVID period, we had money. And then after the COVID, we introduced a tax which was geared towards recovering the resources. And let's not forget, after COVID, it is not the case that nothing is happening. Businesses have returned. Some have even made profits in 2021 more than they had ever even made in their life or in the life of those businesses. So for me, I do not see it as a revamp. Indeed, even when there was no COVID, we were still having taxes, we were still having activities, we were still having revenue. But remember, we didn't have 1% COVID tax when there was no COVID. We also didn't have $400 million from the World Bank when there was no COVID. Therefore, those comments, I think, in as much as we need to revamp the economy, yes, but they should not be justification for introducing the e-Levy.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you for that opinion. So, do you think there are other possible drivers why this is such a big contention in Parliament?
Yes, I think there are some drivers. Number one, Parliament on the side of the government, they do not oppose anything that the government brings. Therefore, it is known that whatever the government brings, they will certainly go ahead and support it. Number two, they have been conscientized that the e-Levy is going to do a number of things. And once they have been told it's going to do things, they will want to go ahead and support it. That is the second point. And thirdly, the idea about the fact that it is being brought by the government is something that they would certainly want to support. And of course, they have seen the kinds of difficulties that we currently face. And I do not think the current difficulties is from COVID. It's actually from the way that the economy had been managed. Because before, 2017, there was no COVID. 2018, there was no COVID. 2019, there was no COVID. And the bulk of the debt that we had accumulated was within these periods. And so for me, that is really not a justification. But that, I think, is the driver from the side of the majority. But of course, we also do know that there is a point that if they're able to raise $6.9 billion from e-Levy, they would use that to be able to contract a loan which is about 4 or 5 times that amount. So the e-Levy will now be a base for them to get additional money. And that is also one of the ideas that is in there. And of course, there's the conspiracy theory that these guys need money for campaign, and because they want to break their it, and it's more difficult for them to win the next election than it was previously. Therefore, they want to begin to raise some money, find a way to siphon some, and then accumulate that for their campaign. So that is a conspiracy theory. And I must note, I'm not saying for sure that, but that is also the thought of some people. So these are the ones that I think are the drivers, especially on the side of the majority. Thank you. Okay, of course, in other African countries, the most recent is Cameroon. They have also introduced the tax, and theirs is as low as 0.2. And then before that was Tanzania, that also introduced one, but theirs is at 2.0. So that of Tanzania is higher than that of Ghana, and that of Cameroon is low, that is 0.2. That was just done in January 2022. Now, if e-Levy is introduced, some money will be made. But as we have explained, the tax is actually not justified. And in Uganda, that the tax was introduced, they had experienced about 44% decline in the usage of Momo when the tax was introduced after a couple of weeks. In our study, we found that more than 60% of the respondents said that they would discontinue the usage of Momo altogether if the tax is pegged at 1.75. Now, if you have more than 62% of your users saying that they will not patronize it, then it means that there is a decline. Indeed, e-Levy has already not happened, but we understand that in December there was a decline in e-Momo transactions of up to 3 billion Ghana cedis. And when the tax has not even introduced, but the fear makes people go out of it, then it means that when it's actually introduced, you're going to see people carry out whatever they had intended. So obviously, it's going to cause a decline in mobile money transactions, to cause a decline in bank transfers, and it will rather bring back the usage of currency, cash. People will be carrying cash around, but carrying cash is not good for the economy. The reason is this: if you have cash in your hand, it is not in the banking system. Therefore, when government wants to control inflation, they have difficulty controlling inflation because they will then have to resort to open market operations, which takes a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort. And their efficiency is not as high as if they do these through the banking system. Now, if I am having cash and I don't send it to the bank, then the bank will also not be able to mobilize resources. Therefore, it will be more expensive for banks to raise money in order to loan to those who need it. In fact, the excuse or the goal that it will be used for digital infrastructure itself is questionable. Because if you introduce a tax, that would cause people not to use digital infrastructure, yet you say you want to use that to build digital infrastructure, then it's illogical. But the important thing is, a talk tax was introduced in this country a couple of years ago, and we were told that it was meant to build digital infrastructure. So what happened to that tax? What is being used for? What has happened? And now we want to reintroduce. So indeed, if we do so, we're going to create problems for ourselves. If our people's how much people have to spend will decline, and when the money declines, then they have less to spend on the on the goods and services, and which will have some implications for the economy. More importantly, we notice that when government takes taxes, that tax is not able to transform to build the economy. One of our brothers said, in Africa, the ministers live 2 expensive lives. And you can imagine they are going to spend it on that. So I think that the implication if the tax is introduced, is going to be more negative than the positive one that we expect to see. I want to allow some time so that I will get back to what alternatives government has. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just as a follow-up to this question, assuming this bill is not passed, to what extent do you think it will affect the budget for 2022?
Now, this bill is supposed to be to raise 6.9 billion Ghana cedis. That is just a small fraction of the total budget, the total revenue that government intends to create. Therefore, for me, that loss is insignificant. Let's remember that every year there is growth in other taxes, including payee. In fact, during during COVID, we noticed the greatest improvement in payee tax over the past 6 years, which means that even COVID brought Ghana more payee tax than during periods that COVID hadn't happened. Therefore, that will not happen. In fact, naturally, there's growth in taxes. There's growth in tax revenue. And now that we are improving digitalization, more and more people are being rolled over into the digital system. And that in itself is going to generate increased revenue. So for me, that loss of money is really not something that is important. Indeed, trying to generate 6.9 billion, which I even doubt would ever happen, because the number of people who will discontinue using Momo, you will not get that. And so I think that not having it is really not a really big deal. But having it is more a big deal. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay. 2 or 3 things. First is expenditure cuts. Second is increasing revenue. And this should not be confused with introducing a new tax. And then the third one is the combination of the two. First, about cutting expenditure. Government ought to cut expenditure. The number of ministers and the number of ministries is just too much. Countries with bigger budgets, bigger economies don't have those numbers of ministers. So government should cut the number of ministers, for example. And number 2, they should check how much these people are paid. And I am really thinking, and I say that, look, the remuneration of these people, including their ex-gratia when they are exiting office, is a lot of money. And they benefit from salary increases several times that of the labor force. And such things are certainly not acceptable. The second is to increase revenue. Now, if you plug the loopholes, you get a lot more money that is coming in as revenue. If you plug the loopholes regarding revenue collection, they'll be going to save money. Number 2, if you plug the loopholes regarding expenditure, you also save a lot of money. We do know that in the recent Auditor General's report, so much money has been cited as being lost. And that money, about 85% of it is actual cash that the government can get. Only about 15% is irregularities, but 85% is actual cash. So government has to collect those things, and that is critical. Now, the level of corruption is terrible, and the government must put its feet down. First of all, they need to repent themselves and ensure that people that they superintend over, the ministries, the agencies they superintend over, they block all those loopholes and then ensure that these things don't happen. And these are the things that they ought to do. I can assure you that if we go to IMF, for example, these recommendations are made at the very things that are going to happen. And if they want to cut expenditure, some of the programs that they have, they need to take a second look at these programs. Free SHS, for example. Now, if I feed my children at home and then they are going to school, then you tell me that you want to go and feed them in school. It does not make sense. Because when they are home, they eat. When they leave home, the food money is saved. So rather, parents should pay for their wards when they go to school. As long as they're in boarding house, they should pay. Government already gives free tuition, accommodation, and so on. That is fine. but the food that the children eat must be paid for. Now, if we do this, it will save government a lot of money. And these things have to be taken, and they have to be noted. And I am of the view that cutting expenditure is one of the surest ways. Cutting expenditure, reducing the number of ministries, and then of course the number of ministers. And these things ought to be done. And of course, we are in the digital age, and we are registering our SIMs and connecting them to our ECOWAS card. I don't like calling it Ghana card, because on the card I don't see Ghana card. What I see is ECOWAS identity card. As we are linking this to our mobile phones, we are actually telling the mobile companies that this is our identity. If the NCA has this in their system, they are able to connect it to the NIA, then it means that my identity is known. Once my identity is known, you can then link me to the services that I engage in, for which I have to pay tax. And this digitalization in itself will enable them to identify people, their houses, where they work, and who they are, and be able to generate money from these areas. That in itself is going to generate a lot of money. And they need to perfect that act. And once they perfect that act, they are going to raise money without e-Levy. And for me, that is that is the way that they need to go. And I want to say something. It's touchy, but I think it's great. And that is to say that government, the executive, they should decide to cut their own salaries. When they do so, the message they'll be sending out is this: we are ready to suffer ourselves. Therefore, you also do something. If they are not willing to suffer, no one else will want to. The equal value or the equivalent value of those notes. But the moment they cut their own salaries, it sends a message. I hope they do, but that is one of the things that they can do, and that will change the landscape, and people will begin to have some kind of sympathy, and they'll be willing to come along. Those are my comments regarding the alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you.